Hey guys, eddbud, and I'm back today to take an initial look at the Asics Dynablast. They've dried out now, took a little while. There was some seriously wet conditions out there yesterday. I have a guest reviewer to accompany me today in a collaboration, Andy the FOD Runner. Andy, thanks so much for joining us today on the channel with your initial views on the Dynablast. A refined Nova Blast, or has the magic gone? We got a 12mm drop here, so quite a considerable drop really. More a race drop, I would suggest. 280 grams or 9.8 ounces in my UK size 11. An improved Nova Blast or something altogether different? Upper first. Asics haven't been quite so generous this time round in the upper material on the Dynablast. In the Nova Blast there was just loads of excess material, especially here in the toe box. This time round we got a slightly more fitting shoe, and that's a good sign. As I said, the Nova Blast was just far too spacious here in the upper. It was way too much room for me. I could have easily gone down half a size. The Dynablast's a little sleeker here, and I would suggest is a more true to size fit. I suggest toe height is still a little bit of a problem. I don't need quite as much room there. Asics just seem to want to give us masses of material. We don't need it. There's less layering to the materials here in the upper as well. A more knit type material I'd suggest. It does remind me a little bit of some of the materials used on the 1080 V10 from New Balance, and also the Beacon from New Balance also. It's certainly soft though. I'd love to have a jumper made out of that. I'm not sure I do really, but it's a thought. My toes certainly felt ventilated on that very chilly and windy run. In fact, I'd suggest the tooling here feels very similar to that of the Evo Ride from Asics. Very, very similar. The Evo Ride's a shoe I sadly have put very few miles into. I need to try and break that one back out at some point. If anybody knows of any cloning technology, please let me know, and I can have 4 of me testing out all the other shoes here in the archive. Fit here is fine, although I do find the laces are actually of that cheese wire variety that Asics seem to utilise on their more budget shoes. As such, watch out for those fingers. I did have to retighten the laces after about 2 miles, I think it was. The shoe did give a little bit, but once retightened, lock was really good and I didn't really think about it for the rest of the run. Just wish those laces were a bit longer as well. I had to fool around to cinch them tight enough using a runner's knot, so if that's something you do use on your running shoes, then you're going to run into some issues. No pun intended there. Felt the tongues reasonably padded, didn't really feel any pressure from the laces over the top of the foot. There's typical amounts of Asics padding here in the heel. Quite a plush feeling I would suggest, and a very rigid heel counter. All those trademark Asics things you come to expect, and some that you've come to enjoy. I'd suggest a more traditional fit here than the Nova Blast. That shoe felt a little bit synthetic to me, I guess. The upper did absorb a little bit of water across the run. It has taken quite a while to dry out. If I tried to make this video yesterday, it just would have been uncomfortable. I'd suggest true to size, though if you've got a narrow foot, you may find that it's swimming around a little bit there, and you'll have some bunching here over the top of the toe box. So a few little issues there in terms of the laces. I don't think I really need that much cushioning back here in the heel, and a little bit of bunching here in the toe box due to my narrow foot. For upper, I'm going to give this a 2.4 out of 3 after my initial run. Andy, what do you make of the upper on the Asics Dynablast?
So just a very quick hello to everyone, and Ed, thank you very much for having me on your channel. Very much appreciated and delighted to be sharing my thoughts with you guys and your fans and your viewers with the Asics Dynablast. For me personally, if we go through the scores like you've done with yours, we'll start with the upper. For me, the upper on this shoe is really, really nice. I liken it to the New Balance 1080 version 10, a nice soft knitted material, which I really enjoyed on that shoe back earlier in the year. So this is very reminiscent of that. I get a really nice lockdown in this shoe, and I do find, as always with most Asics shoes, that it's a super comfortable sort of ankle collar and heel area. It just slips in like a comfy pair of slippers, and that coupled with this knitted upper, I've got to say I really, really enjoy it. So I would definitely give this thing a 2.5 out of 3.
Midsole now. Now, both of these shoes say flytefoam blast. They feel completely different. That insane squish that we had in the Nova Blast simply isn't here in the Dynablast. There's a lot more response here, I found. It's a lot firmer underfoot. I mean, initially the Nova Blast was like a trampoline. The first couple of runs I wasn't set on it at all. It was just too unstable. But a much more solid landing area here in the Dynablast, and it's much more up my street. It's more my cup of tea. The midsole does seem a tad lower in terms of stack height. There's a lot of foam there in the Nova Blast. I'm not entirely sure I wanted it all. They have chopped off some of those angular corners and things on the heel, which has lowered the weight down. We're about 25 grams lighter than the Nova Blast in the same size, so a hair under an ounce. We're only about 5 grams heavier here than Adidas's Boston 9, just to put it into perspective. Underfoot, the shoe performed really well. My initial run, 10 miles, 16.1 kilometers. I was at about 7 minutes 35 per mile average pace, which is about 4 minutes 43 per kilometer. So around tempo pace for me, and the shoe felt really nice. That 12mm drop does promote a more mid to forefoot strike. Don't think it will be for everybody. Some people may really dislike the fact they can feel the heel a little bit more. Didn't really bother me too much. I was more worried about not being knocked over by cars, completely soaked by some huge flooded areas, and also avoiding acorns. Despite that wet and windy weather, I did have a ball in the shoe, and it just looks great as well, don't you think? What an amazing looking shoe. Got it just right, Asics. I think some will be disappointed that that vast cushion is now missing. I'm not entirely sure what they were hoping for there. I think if you like the cushion in the Nova Blast, great. This is something slightly different, a bit more of a responsive ride. I found it easier to pick up the pace in the Dynablast. A more subtle and controlled implementation, perhaps, of the foam. I can see myself using this one on a daily basis, perhaps with some longer runs at tempo pace. Pretty much like today's run, really. It's a 2.7 out of 3 after my initial run for midsole. Furnish us with your thoughts, Andy, on the midsole of the Dynablast.
On to the midsole. The midsole is sadly where the magic ends for me. I was a massive fan of the Asics Nova Blast. Flytefoam Blast just hit the scene, and it was such an incredible midsole. I was delighted to finally get my hands on another shoe that had full length Flytefoam Blast. But sadly, this thing feels like a different density of Flytefoam Blast. It definitely is a lot firmer for me to try and press, and when I was running on it, it was very firm. That coupled with the 12mm heel to toe drop just felt like I had a big wedge of it in the heel. It was rather uncomfortable and did cause my calves a few issues. So sadly, for me personally, I can't give the midsole a very good score. I'm very disappointed. Hopefully they will go back to the compound, the density, whatever the difference is in the Nova Blast for the next shoe that we see with a full Flytefoam Blast midsole. So on this occasion, I'm going to give this thing a 1.5 out of 3.
It's outsole time. Very slight change to the outsole configuration here. Almost like Asics have decided to put a little bit more outsole rubber there, a little bit more surface area, and you can see that the flex point is in a slightly different place. Interesting. It flexes towards the front of the foot naturally, whereas this one seems to flex a little bit further back. We know that the Asics high abrasion rubbers, good stuff. It works well on a variety of surfaces, road, pavement. In the wet today, it was very good. Great grip was achieved actually, even in very, very slippery areas. Obviously with the outsole on this one, they've shaved back some of the exposed midsole to relieve some of the weight. And the Nova Blast is quite a heavy shoe really, over 300 grams in my size. The outsole has a pretty good surface area now in terms of rubber. I did find it slightly strange that you've only got this central section with rubber. Some people tell me it's supposedly like a trampoline, but I'm not really sure about all of that. But the rubber does feel a little bit different, a little bit more sticky perhaps. This certainly felt pretty assured on road and pavement, not so much on any mud patches or on wet grass. It was terrible on that. I mean, this is aimed at being a road shoe. It's not something I could recommend you would use if you're running on grass quite a lot. If you're running on anything muddy, slippery, it's just not going to work. We know the rubber's pretty resilient though. It works on other Asics shoes very well. That side, I didn't feel super assured in those conditions today with this shoe. It's probably one I'll dig out for drier runs. I'm going to give this a 2.2 out of 3 after my initial run for outsole. A good shoe's only complete with a good outsole. What do you make of it on the Dynablast, Andy?
And moving on to the outsole, we've got that AHA rubber, Asics high abrasion rubber. As Ed made a joke in one of his videos a while ago, and I think he still does, this stuff is apparently meant to be super, super durable. No doubt we'll go through another ice age, as he said, and they will uncover this stuff and wonder what the hell it is, and then realise it's AHA rubber outsole from Asics. This stuff is super, super durable. I've got over 250 miles in my Nova Blast, and the AHA rubber on that shoe barely looks like it's even got a scratch on it. So this thing is super durable. I highly anticipate very minimal wear and tear that you're going to see on this stuff. And again, from an Asics perspective, another solid build on this section. So I've got to give this thing a 2.5 out of 3.
Value now. So just over £100, this one isn't particularly bad value, I don't think. You know that an Asics shoe will survive some pretty serious abuse from the roads and pavement. They tend to hold up pretty well over time. I've got to say this shoe's a better fit for me than the Clifton 7. I'll be coming to that one soon on my 100-mile review. I class this as a slightly more plush Adidas SL20, or perhaps closer to the Beacon series actually in terms of performance. Certainly a better shoe for me off the bat than the Hoka Oni Clifton 7. A little more plush and refined than the Reebok Energy 2. Way better fit and much lighter than the Pegasus 37. In fact, I think it's lighter than all three of those shoes I've just mentioned. I've got no qualms giving this a 2.7 out of 3 in terms of value. I don't think you can go too far wrong really with a shoe that's just over £100 and has some really good versatility. Earth credits are in short supply, Andy. What do you think about value of the Asics Dynablast?
And finally, on to value. I have to say, £110, it's not a bad value shoe. Full retail price, that is £110 at the moment. I managed to get a discount, so paid slightly under £100. Got it off sportshoes.com, so that was good. And so from that perspective, getting a shoe under £100 these days is quite a decent price. In the world where running shoe prices are going up and up and up. Would I put this thing as really good value? I'm looking at this and going, I paid roughly the same amount for the Fuel Cell Prism. I paid roughly the same amount last year for my Beacon version 2. What shoes am I looking at in that category and thinking this is actually good bang for my buck? Well, I have to say the New Balance Fuel Cell Prism gets 10 out of 10 for bang for buck. Same price, a much better shoe. It's a decent value, don't get me wrong, but I think for the package, for me, for the whole running experience and the fact that I suffered a little bit with the midsole, I'm gonna say that it is, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 3. It's a good value, but for me and my running experience, that just knocks the price or the rating down a little bit. If you guys have a better experience, you might certainly give this thing a higher score. If you like higher, like 12mm heel to toe drops, it might just work for you, and in which case you're definitely looking at a solid 2.5 out of 3. But for me personally, I'm going to go with a 2 out of 3. If
I've counted up the scores correctly, that should give us 10 out of 12 after my initial run in the Asics Dynablast. Have you ran in either of these shoes, and what did you make of them? Certainly the Dynablast feels like a more refined take on what the Nova Blast started. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. I'd like to say thanks to Andy for appearing on the show today. Thanks, Andy. May your search for higher size shoes be a successful one. A musical interlude. One of the very first albums that a very young EDDBUD bought on vinyl was Into the Dragon by Bomb the Bass. There's some really great tracks on here. A real variety of different types of music. People often think of Bomb the Bass as a dance band, but they were very much a genre-pushing sort of act. There's a beautiful version of Say a Little Prayer, an electronic ballad, I think you could probably call it. There's a dance meets rock track called Don't Make Me Wait, with a really cooking electric guitar solo. By 80s sort of standards, I suppose. One of the super tracks on the album is a song called Shake It, which has just got hundreds of different samples and pieces stitched together like an audio patchwork quilt. And of course the title track Beat This, which I can remember buying a vinyl copy of in Spain while we were on holiday. I think I was about 9 at the time, and I convinced my mum that I wanted to buy this record from this record shop, and she let me buy it in the end. It took me several days to convince her. I still have that record. It's got Spanish print on the label. Very, very cool. Something to hang on to. I gotta stop hanging on to things. Too many things. Do check that one out, Into the Dragon by Bomb the Bass. Hope you've enjoyed today's video, and thanks for watching through to the very end. It really helps the channel out if you hit that subscribe button and click the bell below for notifications of when we launch those new videos. Also, give this video a thumbs up like and share it with your running buddies. My name's EDDBUD, and I'll be seeing you.